Every time a new AI model launches, the same thing happens. People post benchmark charts. One model is higher, another model is lower. Everyone declares a winner, but coding benchmarks are more complicated than that. And with GPT 5.6 versus Fable 5, the benchmark conversation matters because developers are trying to decide what to trust. Two benchmark names come up often in AI coding discussions: terminal bench and SWE-bench. Terminal-style benchmarks focus on command-line workflows. They test whether a model can use a terminal-like environment, coordinate steps, and complete practical tasks. SWE-style benchmarks focus more directly on software engineering issues, often involving repositories, bugs, and patches. Both are useful, neither is perfect. There are also broader evaluations in the mix. OpenAI cites BowsComp at 92.2% and OSWorld 2OA at 62.6% for GPT 5.6 Sol. Artificial Analysis says Solmax leads its coding agent index at 80 points. Val's AI lists Claude Fable 5 at 95% on SWE-bench verified. So if someone cherry-picks one chart, they can tell almost any story they want. Terminal-heavy benchmarks may reward tool coordination. That is valuable for agents. But they may not fully capture the messiness of large real code bases. Repo-heavy benchmarks may reward patch quality. That is valuable for developers, but they may not capture broader agent workflows outside coding. So if GPT 5.6 performs extremely well on one benchmark, that does not automatically mean it dominates every kind of software work. The same is true for Fable 5. A model can be weaker on one benchmark and still feel better in planning, architecture, or long context reasoning. The word cheating also needs care. Sometimes people use it to mean actual benchmark contamination. Sometimes they mean reward hacking, where the model learns behaviors that score well without reflecting real-world usefulness. Sometimes they mean the benchmark does not measure the thing developers care about. Those are different claims. Before publishing any strong claim, verify exactly what happened. Do not say a model cheated unless there is direct evidence from a credible evaluation. The safer framing is this: benchmarks can be gamed. Benchmarks win be incomplete, and benchmark wins do not always transfer to real work. That is true and useful. For developers, the practical benchmark is your own repo. Run both models on a real bug. Ask for a minimal patch. Require tests. Compare the diff. Track how much human correction was needed. That tells you more than a chart. Public benchmarks are a starting point. Your workflow is the final test. So did GPT 5.6 cheat the benchmarks? Do not reduce it to a meme. Ask a better question. Which benchmark predicts the work you actually do? If you use agents, terminal benchmarks matter. If you maintain code bases, patch benchmarks matter. If you plan products, neither may be enough. That is the honest way to compare GPT 5.6, Fable 5, and every model that comes next. Here's how to talk about benchmark controversy without misleading people. First, separate three ideas. Benchmark contamination means the model may have seen the task or very similar data during training. Reward hacking means the model learns behavior that gets a high score without being genuinely useful. Benchmark mismatch means the benchmark is real, but it does not match your work. Those are not the same thing. If you mix them together, you create drama but lose accuracy. For a YouTube video, the better angle is not this model cheated unless you have hard evidence. The better angle is this benchmark may not prove what people think it proves. That is true for almost every AI launch. A model can dominate a terminal benchmark and still be annoying inside a product planning session. A model can do well on patch tasks and still fail at DevOps workflows. A model can win public tests and still be too expensive for daily use. So the practical takeaway is this: benchmarks should decide what you test first, not what you trust forever. If GPT 5.6 scores high on tool-heavy benchmarks, test it on agent workflows. If Fable 5 feels strong in reasoning, test it on planning and architecture. If a cheaper model is close enough on simple tasks, use it where cost matters. Do not outsource your judgment to a leaderboard. Leaderboards are useful maps. They are not the territory. Your repo, your budget, your users, and your risk tolerance are the territory. That is where the real winner is decided. For this topic, the responsible conclusion is not boring. It is actually stronger. Do not say benchmarks are useless. Say benchmarks are incomplete. That is a more accurate and more useful argument. Terminal bench-style results can tell you something about tool use. SWE-bench-style results can tell you something about patching. Safety evaluations can tell you something about risky behavior. Pricing tells you something about whether the workflow can scale, but no single number tells you whether the model is right for you. That is the central message. If a creator only shows one chart and declares the war over, they are selling simplicity. Developers need something better. They need a decision process. Start with public benchmarks, identify likely strengths, run private tasks, Measure cleanup, track cost, choose the role. That is how to use benchmarks without being fooled by them. The chart starts the conversation, your own evidence ends it. The responsible headline is not GPT 5.6 cheated. The responsible headline is benchmarks can reward different behaviors, and developers need to know which behavior the benchmark is actually measuring. That still creates drama, but it is drama with engineering value.